What's up, my good people? It's your favorite plus-size model, Tutan Reyes. Thank you for joining us on this week's edition of the Behind the Mask podcast, a special Veterans Day edition. And we sit down with retired U.S. Army Colonel Gregory D. Gadson. Make sure you subscribe to the Behind the Mask podcast. Share also with a friend, like, and leave a comment so we can engage a little bit. Also, let us know who you'd like to see on the show. Remember, on the Behind the Mask podcast, there's only one rule. There are no rules.
Let's go behind the mask.
Welcome back to another special edition. You know what? This is not a special edition. This is the Veterans Day, Veterans Week edition of the Behind the Mask podcast. Yes, I am your host, Takeo Spikes, joined alongside by my co-host, better known as
your favorite plus-size model, Tutan Reyes, in the building.
What's happening, too?
What's good, brother? How's everything?
Hey, man, like you always say, it's another great day to be living on this side of the soil. And we have a special guest, too. I know you're excited to get him on, right?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Well, before we bring him on, man, we gotta give him his credit because his credit is definitely deserved. Listen, Distinguished Service Medal, 2 Legions of Merit, 3 Bronze Stars. That's right, 3 Bronze Stars, a Purple Heart, and several meritorious service medals.
Purple Heart and 3 Bronze Stars, and now he's got a Super Bowl ring, minted for a true giant.
Listen, y'all give it up for our outstanding guest, Colonel Gadson.
Thank you, gentlemen. I appreciate the warm welcome and enthusiastic welcome. Thank you.
Yeah, you deserve it. And
Absolutely.
It's quite an honor to have you on the show. This is the week. It's Veterans Week. Veterans Day is coming upon us soon. And we wanted to give you credit and just say thank you for everything that you've done and really all of your other colleagues who really allowed us the opportunity to be able to put this show on for you today.
Well, thank you. And we appreciate it. Just kind of a point that you bring up there is think about the fact that I hope we all voted or participated in a voting process. And that's a fundamental part of exercising a democracy. And we've, defended that right for more than 240 years. So thank you.
Well, without further ado, Colonel Gadson, we'll jump right into it.
Right.
Did a lot of research now because we were excited to have you. Didn't realize I heard rumors of you playing with the pigskin on the football field. You were a high school football standout, and I want to know what made you to decide to attend West Point and then later join the military.
Well, like many young men that play in high school, I certainly had dreams of playing in college and ultimately going to the pros and being a champion. And I was I'm from Tidewater, Virginia. Went to high school in Chesapeake, Virginia. I was an all-state football player, actually captain of my half of the state's all-star team. And so, I thought I had done and prepared myself to continue to play football at the next highest level, to pursue that dream. For whatever reasons, I think probably mostly my size and maybe my speed, I didn't earn that opportunity. I don't want to say I wasn't given, but I didn't earn that opportunity. And so, toward the end of the recruiting season, actually well into, I think, January, or February of my senior year in high school, I still didn't have any place to go. And a guy named Ted Gill, maybe you guys have run into him or recognized the name. He came to my high school to recruit a friend of mine who was an offensive lineman to go to West Point, where Ted was on the staff. And my head coach at Indian River, John Dukes, told him about me. And so Tracy and I ended up going up to West Point for my fifth official visit. And I didn't know what West Point was about. I think the only really serious question that I had was did they play Division 1A football, and because that's what I wanted to play. I wanted to play with the best, and they said yep, and I just said I was coming. So I didn't have designs or thoughts about serving the military. I did realize that making this decision to go to the military academy was not going to allow me to play football at the professional level, or didn't anticipate it at least. So I kind of went there with a chip on my shoulder because I wanted to prove that I could play at the highest level. And that was my only opportunity.
That's an interesting story. And funny thing about that is my senior year in high school, I already had a scholarship to Ole Miss, right, to play football. Right. However, a friend of mine came to my summer job, and we went to a recruiting office. So he signed up. He said, I'm going to the Marines. I'm like, okay, that's cool. He said, just come with me. So I go to the recruiting office with him. And as we're there, he's signing the papers, and I'm just watching him like, wow, you really going through with this? And the recruiter's like, looks at me. He's like, what about you? What are you doing? I was like, oh, I'm going back to work. he's like, what are you doing with your future? I'm like, probably go to college. He's like, well, we could pay for your college scholarship, et cetera. I'm like, I already have a scholarship. No, I'm not interested. But went on to play football. But in that same context, how difficult is it for a young man or a young woman who has a different career path in mind to say, you know what, I want to go ahead and serve my country and join the military?
Well, great question. Thank you. I think, a lot of, I get parents, I get young men and women that ask me about serving in the military. And I guess my counsel that I share with them is this: it's almost like it's like your education. There's only a brief window that you're eligible to continue to serve in our armed forces. And again, like your diploma, like your education, is something that you have with you the rest of your life. And most, if not all, that have had a chance to serve, it's the camaraderie that you and I know from the gridiron. It's very similar in serving uniform, and it's something you have the rest of your life. And what's 2 or 3 years to mature? I think a lot of times, college students, we go and we spend all mom and dad's extra money, changing majors and all that kind of stuff. And a few years of maturity in the military on the government's dime. And then, oh, by the way, Uncle Sam can cover your education. It really is not a bad path to follow.
Definitely not a bad path to follow, as we all have loved ones who are possibly active in the military or previously been in the military. But looking at your resume, you stayed in for over 26 years, your service. And what was surprising and also very impressive was that throughout the 26 years, you were involved in every major conflict over the last 2 decades. I think about Operation Desert Shield that was in Kuwait. I also think about Operation Joint Forge in Bosnia, Afghanistan, Operation Iraq, and for freedom. So, when I look at that, your life changed on May 7th, 2007. What can you tell us about that day that you can remember?
Well, absolutely. I remember that day. because I knew when that day started out, I had, I had some meetings and I had some engagements that I had with some Iraqi leaders. But ultimately, I knew kind of at the end of the day that I was going to attend a memorial service for two young men who were in a sister battalion from Fort Riley, Kansas, where I had deployed from. First Lieutenant Ryan Jones and Specialist Sunson had been killed 3 or 4 days earlier, and the leaders in my brigade and anybody that could make it, we were going to pay our respects for these young men. And I remember that as I talked to you about it, I remember just kind of thinking about how these young men would never see their dreams realized, and really what their families were going through, and the huge sacrifice. And I quite honestly too started to kind of question it. Iraq was extremely violent in those early months of 2007, and I just wondered if this sacrifice, quite honestly, was worth it. I was heading back to my headquarters in a 4-vehicle patrol. I was the third of 4 vehicles, traveling on what would account, if you can imagine any interstate highway. We would travel in this herringbone formation, so we weren't lined up, moving out down the road as fast as it can. And that's when my vehicle was hit by a roadside bomb. It was command wire detonated, so it wasn't the fact that I ran over. It was the fact that someone actually had eyes on my vehicle and decided to try to take my vehicle out. The blast lifted my 15,000-pound vehicle off the road, and it ejected me out of the vehicle, where I can remember, vividly flying through the air and hitting the ground and coming to a rolling stop on my back. So this was the second time in 4 months that my vehicle had been hit by a roadside bomb. So I knew what it was. But this time I obviously was wounded, and I knew it was serious because I couldn't get up, I couldn't move. And the last thing that that I said was, God, I don't want to die in this country. And I was out. My teammates, I call them my teammates, men like First Sergeant Frederick Johnson. He was a senior non-commissioned officer in my patrol. He would be the first to arrive at my vehicle, and actually was the one that recognized that I wasn't there. And he found me about a football field away from where my vehicle came to a stop. I was already unconscious, and he started to resuscitate me. And one of my junior soldiers, a 19-year-old kid named Eric Brown, would put the tourniquets on my legs.
Medic Eric Brown was riding in the 4th vehicle behind Gadson's when the colonel's vehicle took the hit.
The first thing I remember seeing was his legs, and the first thing that went through my mind is, ooh, that's not right. I immediately applied the tourniquets, and from there I tried to cut his armor off using trauma shears and my knife, which was a lot harder than you.
A fact that the doctors say saved my life. I can keep going if you want. So ultimately, just to kind of give you, and the doctors credit this young man for saving my life. That night, I would go through 129 pints of blood. I mean, the average human holds between 6 and 8 pints. I went through 129 pints. I died 5 or 6 times that evening.
Wow.
And I'm here by the grace of God. And just to kind of give you, a perspective of how difficult those months were, I can tell you that in the month of May of 2007 alone, 131 U.S. service members would pay in full measure, would pay with their lives. So it was violent.
And we continue to hear you talk in such detail about your time serving. It just puts things in perspective, particularly with us as athletes. We complained about something simple like training camp, like 2-a-days, but you had to literally put your life on the line every day for your country, as I mentioned, my friend, he served in the military. He used to send me letters saying it was so descriptive. The soda in Iraq or Afghanistan tasted like battery acid, and you're dealing with triple-digit weather every day.
Yep.
Like, it's just, the imagery is unfathomable. But to your point, your leadership role, your strength, you could have very well said, you know what, I'm done, but you continue to serve in active duty after your injuries. I ask you why.
Well, again, I appreciate the thoughtful questions. You know, I would tell you. So I was evacuated out of Iraq on the 8th of May, and I would arrive at Washington D.C. at Walter Reed on the 11th of May, and I still had my legs, but they were obviously very badly damaged. I had to go through surgery every other day to clean out my wounds and repair my blood vessels. 1 week after getting back at Walter Reed, the blood vessels in my left leg could no longer sustain blood flow, and I started to bleed to death while I was in the intensive care. The ICU nurse literally pulled off her belt and put a field expedient tourniquet on my leg, and they took me into surgery and amputated my left leg above the knee to save my life. Well, the next day, the same thing happened to my right leg, but they were able to pull a vein actually from my left bicep and put in my right leg, and they were able to save my right leg. Well, by this time, I was out of an induced coma, and I could communicate with the doctors. Ultimately, I made the decision for the doctors to amputate my right leg above the knee. I just figured that my quality of life would be better in two prosthetics than in one prosthetic and a leg that was never going to, ultimately wasn't going to work as it was intended. And I just wanted to move on. So on the 24th of May, the docs, in fact, amputated my right leg above the knee. Well, when I came out of surgery, I got some more good news, and I say that with a little tongue in cheek, but they had to they re-x-rayed my right arm before I went in for that amputation. And when I came out, they told me that my right arm was broken above the elbow, and the radial head of my elbow were broken, and it would require surgery to repair it. So about a week later, I would have that surgery on my arm, and unfortunately, due to some complications in that surgery, I sustained ulnar nerve and radial nerve damage. The ulnar nerve damage to this day still prevents me from really utilizing all the fingers on my right hand. And at the time, the radial nerve damage prevented me from picking up my wrist. I was also dealing with a heterotopic ossification, where my body was producing too much calcium because of the blast injury, and it caused my right arm to lock up at the elbow. So I was functionally down to one limb. My non-dominant left arm and hand was all I could use. And I tell you, that was the straw that kind of broke the camel's back. And I just wanted to give up. I wanted to quit. And I tried. But that's when I found out kind of who I was. Not that you go around trying to, sort out your character or whatever. But I think as an athlete, as a football player, I'd never quit in my life. And even in these moments, I couldn't quit. And so that's when I decided that, you know what, I kind of say this with a little tongue in cheek, but the Army wasn't paying me for how fast I could run. They're paying me for what was here and what was here. And so I began to push back and say, I want to serve, and I'll do whatever it is you want me to do. But I'm not done yet. And I was fortunate and blessed that the Army gave me that opportunity.
Well, Colonel Gadson, you are the epitome of courage, perseverance, heart, integrity. What messages do you have for people facing adversity or difficult situations in their own lives?
Well, I think I try to boil it down to really kind of three things. I think it's important, as an athlete, to be present. You cannot play the last play if you screwed it up, and you can't play the next play. You have to be present, and I think athletes, particularly when we're performing, when you're performing, you epitomize that idea of being present. And then what that when you are present, I believe that it allows you to be your best. And conversely, if you're still thinking about a play you screwed up, then you're not going to be your best. Or if you're worried about whether or not you're going to win the game, then you're not going to be your best. You've got to learn to give your all and be present and be your best. And then I think you can, and if you can do those things, then you can be at peace, because you can accept whatever happens to you in life, and whatever the results are. And so I in various forms, I try to get that message across is, look, we control very little in life. And at the end of the day, I recognize that I'm very blessed, but I can only focus my energy on being present and trying to achieve my best.
Yeah, you made the analogy talking about how it is. You have to go to the next play. You really can't relish and sit back and think of what it could have been or what you did wrong. You have to continue to progress. I remember reading the paper, and this is going back to 2007. And I think the sporting world, all of the sporting world, had the first introduction of Colonel Gregory Gadson when you went into the Giants locker room and you spoke to the team. What was that gap of need that you saw when you went in to speak to the guys? Because I remember Michael Strahan was on that team, O.C. Umenyor, Eli Manning. What was that gap of need that you saw that you could feel and be able to give them some good advice that they can take on throughout the entire season? Eventually, they end up winning the Super Bowl that year too as well.
Right. So you give me way too much credit for understanding a need. First of all, I have to acknowledge my classmate and my former teammate at West Point, Mike Sullivan, who was a coach on the Giants. He was a wide receivers coach, Plexico Burrs' coach, in fact, and David. I don't know if David Tyree's coach. And Mike had come to visit me in the hospital in Walter Reed. And the Giants that season had started out 0-2, and they were coming to Washington, D.C. to play the Redskins, who were 2-0. And so Mike obviously saw something in me and felt that I had something to share. This was just 4 months after being wounded. And as much as I was talking to the Giants, I was honestly, Takeo, probably talking to myself. This was the first time that I'd ever spoken to anybody outside the military. And
the first Giants practice Gadson ever attended was during New York's preparation for the Super Bowl, before he was invited to speak to the team one more time.
Belief is that powerful. When I was laying down, those guys were freaking doing all the things that I never believed that I would not live.
I really just tried to share what I just shared with you a few minutes ago about, being your best and counting on each other. We think about the fans and all the other kind of things that are kind of tied to the game, but it's about those 11 guys on the field. And I just really tried to connect that same experience of why we fight. I mean, mom and dad and apple pie, all that stuff sounds, important, and it has its role, but those are the furthest things from our mind when we're out on that battlefield. And it's about battling for one another. And I tried to convey that. Look, get rid of all that other kind of stuff. play the play you're in, do your best and put it all on the line. It's
touchdown Giants! The New York Giants have knocked off the New England Patriots with the most improbable win in recent memory.
tomorrow's not guaranteed, and I'm an example of that.
And speaking of things that are tied to the game, you see athletes now really using their platform to speak of injustices outside of the game, things that are dear to their heart, right?
Yep.
You're on record. You disagree with Colin Kaepernick and some others for actually taking a knee, not standing for the anthem a few years back. But you also said, I defended the people's right for freedom of speech. So I don't agree with Kaepernick's decision, but I have to respect it. Because if I don't, then I don't respect our Constitution. So with all that's going on today, and you continue to see athletes using their platform, some do kneel for the anthem. Has your opinion of that changed any? And what are your thoughts on that today?
Well, great question, and I appreciate the chance to kind of address that. So the main reason I say I probably was against the kneeling is because it had become hijacked. His message was being lost. It had become an emotional fire point, and why he was doing that was totally and emotionally tied up into what he was doing instead of what he was trying to bring attention to. But again, that being said, he has that right, and if it got us and he had to make that personal decision. So look, I'm probably twice as old as Colin, and we can argue maybe a little wiser. Sometimes you gotta give a little I say live and fight for another day, and so I it's been a few years, obviously, between what he was doing and where we're at now, and many can acknowledge, from Roger Goodell on down, that it was misinterpreted and his message lost, and Colin Kaepernick, unfortunately, is not in the league, and we can all kind of talk about the reasons for that, but I wasn't in his shoes, and I have a different perspective. I want to hold our country accountable as much as anybody, and again, I would choose a different way.
Colonel, it's a good point, because everybody has different perspectives. And when you look at sport, when you look at politics, the one thing that they do have in common is that they bring people together to have tough conversations.
Right.
And one of the things I remember vividly having a conversation in the locker room with one of my teammates was it was brought to my attention that the active duty military, they're supposed to be nonpartisan.
Right.
However, at the end of the day, the president is the commander in chief. So I'm grateful to be able to ask you this. And so I want to ask you, do you think it is difficult for the nation's men and women in the armed service to be political during these times, knowing that the difference of opinion is easily out there of what they see?
Yeah. So I don't think so. I think we've had. I still connect with folks in uniform, and I ask them the difficult questions, and with respect to the commander in chief, and so first of all, we have an opportunity to demonstrate and to voice our grievances. What we can't do is we can't do it in uniform, because that's our official capacity in the government. But as private citizens, we can voice our opinions and concerns. And so, because that's a right of every American, we can't do it in uniform because we represent the government. I can say that the current president has challenged our thoughts in the military, and I think I've seen a couple of surveys that have shown that he has paid a price. His popularity or his has gone down since being president with those in uniform. So I'm glad to see that, because I'm glad to see that people have kind of thought about and recognize the positions that he's taken that are not tied with the values, the same values. I've often said that in uniform, if I had said the same things that he says from the office of the presidency, I would have been relieved. I would have been thrown out of the Army. And so many of those things are inconsistent with our values. But we didn't take an oath to the president. We took an oath to support and defend the Constitution. And so at the end of the day, I'm really proud, and I continue to be proud that our military has done a pretty good job, not a perfect job, but done a pretty good job of continuing to manage that fine line that this president has taken us toward.
Now that you're retired, and I would say somewhat out of the system, what are your personal thoughts, if you would like to share, when it comes to just looking at it's election time right now, and you see a lot of cities are boarding up stores, and this is unprecedented. Right. I've never seen it throughout my 43 years of living. So what are your personal thoughts on that as you see where we come from to this point to where we are and where we're hoping to go?
Right. Yeah. I did, Takeo, I agree. I think it's almost kind of sad, but I think it's also revealing that we're in a place that we are having to consider that. We are, as a nation, we're supposed to be the example for the rest of the world on how to have peaceful elections and peaceful changes of power. And we're concerned that that's not going to happen. And so I think it has been a wake-up call for us to kind of evaluate ourselves as individuals, but as a nation on where we are and where we want to be and what it's going to take to move to get back to a place where we don't have to do these kind of things. I will tell you that, through this journey, I think sometimes we want to be on the side of right, and get in our corners and say, look, I'm right and you're wrong. But I'm not sure, honestly, I'm not sure that's the approach. I mean, I think about my last operational deployment in Iraq, where my country asked us to stop the violence between the Sunnis and Shia. And so I was in the role of a peacemaker. And think about, I'm not saying, hey, Sunni, you're right, or Shia, you're right. Let's find a ground where we can both find some common ground and get to peace. And that's what I was tasked to do 13 years ago. Well, you know what? That's what we need to be doing now. For us to go, hey, you're wrong because you like Trump, or you're wrong because you like Biden, is not the answer. We have to come together and because nobody owns the complete truth. And if you give me it's a long-winded answer, but I love to give this example of, I wish I had a quarter to hold up in front of you. But if I had that, imagine that I'm holding a quarter. Well, one of us sees a heads and one of us sees a tail, and somebody might see a leading a trailing edge. Now we all know that we're looking at a quarter. We all are telling the truth, but we all see something different. And if we just think about the truth and think about it in the terms of perspective from where you come from, and then we negotiate there, I think we can start to heal and start to make progress. But if I'm adamant that that I see a heads and I'm the only one that's right, and you're adamant that you see tails, we're never going to get anywhere.
And it's all about perspective. I totally get it. And this is the thing, because I really didn't know this until I actually started traveling abroad. I had the opportunity. I love to go on vacation. I want to put that out there. And right. I go to different countries, have the opportunity to sit down with different people from different nations and just to get their perspective. Now, one of the things that really blew my mind, because most people don't have the opportunity that you and I had the opportunity to go and see the world, was that I'm talking about here was I was surprised to see the people from Europe, people from Australia, people from Greece. They call me to this day and they pay more attention to what we're doing from the election standpoint, more so than some of the people who are here on U.S. soil. And so can you just talk about the influence, how much it means to be a U.S. citizen and the influence that we carry and how we truly do lead the world?
Yep. If I could try to describe, what it's like to be an American when you travel outside of the country, I will just tell you this. I don't care if you're black, white, green, or whatever. There's just something about being an American, and they can spot us like white on rice. It is, we stand out. There's a essence that an American has and how we move about that just makes us stand out. We're at the top. We're where many people want to be or visit or appreciate. That's the kind of burden, I think, the burden and the responsibility that we carry. And quite honestly, they depend on. They expect that from us. And you could argue that that's the burden. Too much is given, much is expected, and it's disappointing when we don't step up in that leadership world. I mean, you can sit here and say, other countries aren't paying their fair share, and yeah, if you want to look at it as a transaction, yeah, but we're at the top of the food chain. And so, that's kind of what goes along with the territory.
And Colonel Gadson, I think just having this conversation with you is so refreshing for our audience that may have not known who you were. They for sure know now. To continue to remind them, you also recently added actor to your resume. You starred in the Hollywood movie Battleship with Rihanna. How was that role that you played in the movie similar to your life where you portrayed a war-injured veteran?
Right. So it was, so I had never acted before in my life.
Nick?
I got this.
I never played a tree in a school play, much less acted. And the reason why I was even selected was, a couple of things that happened. But I was the first W amputee to wear two bionic legs in the world, and I had been a small part of a larger article that National Geographic had published in 2010 talking about the advancements in prosthetics. A lot of it was driven by the government and the military, and the injuries that service members were facing in a war. Obviously, provided much needed research and resources, and so we were making huge advances. And and I was able to kind of be a test pilot for some of these devices. And again, my photo ended up being in National Geographic, and Peter Berg, who was a New York Giants fan, saw the photo, and that's when he asked me to act in a movie. I certainly was not, I could identify with the character and the journey that he was dealing with. They weren't my personal experiences, but I, when I'm asked this question, what I like to say is, I mean, there were probably close to 100 of us in the rehab room at Walter Reed when I was recovering in 2007. And I like to feel like my character was the culmination of many of those men and women that were recovering, because I picked up on that. I had conversations with them. I saw the struggles, not only going through mine, but many of the struggles that my brothers and sisters were going through. And so that character that I got to play was really the culmination of many of the experiences and that I had and that I experienced as I was recovering.
You talked about your picture being in National Geographic, and that's what really led to you being in the role of the movie Battleship. So I'm a photographer, and I caught word that you're a photographer as well.
Yep,
you had some of your pieces exhibited in New York.
Yep.
So like, how did all of that happen, like with the interest?
So I think my dad when my dad was young, had an interest in photography, but as his professional life as a pharmacist took hold, it really became a hobby that he didn't ultimately pursue. But I seemed to kind of gravitate, and I remember with my graduation present money from high school, I bought my first Nikon FG film camera. And so really from the age of 18 on, it's been a tremendous passion of mine. I think of my camera as almost my writing tablet. Many people write or they like to read, but my camera is my canvas. And really, it was sort of private. In fact, other than my immediate family, not many people kind of knew that was sort of my thing. I mean, I had a camera in my vehicle when I was wounded. I had a camera in all my deployments, and I, and anybody that was close to me always has known that I've got, multiple cameras typically with me. And so again, it's sort of my way of kind of, when you say, kind of capture a moment, it's not anything that I don't have in mind, or I want to publish this, or I want to share this. It's just about the art of trying to capture what I feel when I see something. And that's, ultimately my challenge as a photographer.
It's interesting. And I was going to ask you, did you ever think of publishing those photos that you had? I know Takeo had his book Behind the Mask, and what inspired him as well was his final years in the NFL, then going out filming some of the greatest linebackers to ever play in the NFL. He used that and actually published his book Behind the Mask. So what was your hesitancy in not sharing those images with the world?
Well, I think probably sort of uncertainty, or maybe not thinking it was kind of worthy or good enough. And so I would run into it was an introduction that was made through a lieutenant general, a retired Caldwell, retired three-star general from the class of 1967 at West Point, had introduced me to this woman, Brookie Maxwell, who was interested in the aspect of arts and healing. And so my photography was actually, and I totally gravitated to that idea because I understood how important being able to photograph was in my healing process. And so after I began to show her some of my photography over the years, she's the one that kind of gave me the confidence and convinced me that I should share some of my stuff with the world.
And you also like to scuba dive. I think that's amazing because I actually went scuba diving in the past. Funny thing about it is I asked our brother Takeo to come out with me. He was scared, so he didn't want to do it, you know. But what is it about scuba diving that excites you? And do you still have the goal to scuba dive in the Red Sea?
Yes. Well, I love the scuba dive, and I still have. Boy, you've done some work there, Tutan.
Oh yeah, we go behind the mask, baby.
Yeah. And so I in fact, I'm hopefully going to a dive in the Truk Islands out in the South Pacific next October. So I have been able to dive. I actually earned my advanced open water certification after being wounded. So, you know, we live on land, obviously, but 3/4 of our planet is covered by water. And when I'm down there, first of all, I'm on par with everybody else. You know, my injuries are still visible, but I'm on even footing, so to speak. And there's just so much of our planet to see down there and experience. And so that's what fascinates me about, you know, being in the water. I actually, a couple of years ago, I got a chance to dive in the Atlanta Aquarium with the whale sharks. I know if you've been to Atlanta, you've probably seen those massive whales. They're like Greyhound buses, 40 tons, you know, and you got to get out of the way because they'll just knock you out of the way. I mean, they eat plankton, so they're not any threat to us. But again, it is. I think it's a part of our world that we truly don't appreciate, and we really got to get Takeo down there. So
yeah, man.
Yeah.
Colonel, listen, I want to jump in because listen, the plus size model talking about I'm afraid. Now, this is the same guy. Halloween just passed a few days ago. This is the same guy who was afraid to go into a scary house. But you a 300-pound ninja. You a 300-pound offensive lineman. Come on, man.
Colonel Gadson, I wasn't scared. I was just concerned. All right. Why would you pay someone to scare you? That makes absolutely no sense. Just doesn't make sense.
So look, let's all face our fears. You know what? That's how we grow, right?
Maybe we can start right here in Atlanta, going back to the aquarium.
Yeah.
I don't know if we can start with them whales though. I know they eat plankton. What you said, they eat plankton, right?
Yeah. So they're not
going to mess with you.
Yep.
This all dark meat right here, baby.
Yeah. There's nothing in there. Man. I guarantee you.
I think he's scared. We got to get him out to the ocean. That's where it's really at because there's no screaming underwater. Once you're down there, you can't scream because if you do, you're going to get water in your mouth. Your oxygen tank's going to flow out. You got to be really you have to channel your inner chi and really be comfortable with your training because if you don't, you'll panic and that's when things start to go wrong.
Absolutely. I mean, I know when when I haven't dove in a long time, I'm really kind of you gotta calm yourself down, but you get to you get to listen to yourself breathe, you know, and it's just a peace. It's a unique peace that comes about you when you're diving it. And I skydive, I ski still, and I mean it's I think it's I think our life and maximizing our life about being our best is taking on things that make us uncomfortable. That's how we grow. That's how we improve.
Yeah,
I love it, but I'm not skydiving though. I'm not doing that.
Yeah, I'll pass on that one, but I love the fact that you now live in a world of life after the military. And I somewhat live in a world of life after football, playing 15 years. Tell us more about your current work and where you find fulfillment today. I know you have a purpose and you always look back to reach and talk about some of your colleagues that you serve with, Hope for the Warriors in particular.
Right. So, I was always, as I was, realizing that my military career was going to come to an end, it was, sometimes I would just say out loud, what am I going to do when I grow up? Because I, wore the uniform. I was doing exactly what I was designed to do, but all good things come to an end. And I made a decision to depart. I had 5 more years that I could have stayed in, but I knew I was ready to move on. And as I thought about, really wanting to move on, I kind of took, I'd say, inventory of what was most important to me. And the answer to that was having control of my time, being able to manage my time and not being, driven by, the requirements of my life. And so I started a company. Actually, I started a company called Patriot Strategies, LLC, a year just after I was wounded, because I had started to become a speaker in demand, and I needed, and at the recommendation of Army lawyers, they recommended that I start a company so I could keep my government activities separate from my private activities. So as I exited the military, I took on a former West Point football teammate and class of '86 graduate as a business partner, and to try to do government service-based contracts, primarily with the Department of Defense. So that would be my first way of continuing to serve. I've done some contracts, I've done some work with wounded warriors, and really just the whole plethora of activity. And what that's allowed me the freedom to do is to speak and travel, as you said, Takeo, just being able to travel around the world and engage, because I have control of my life. And then finally, I think last and most important was, I feel like I have, there's no more mountains for me to climb, so to speak, but it's about giving back and giving back to my community. And I say I loosely define my community as first the veteran community, African-American community, the veteran and the disabled community, and using my voice, using my platform to be able to make a difference. And so working with organizations like Hope for the Warriors, the Gary Sinise Foundation, the Vail Veterans, the Workhouse Out Center here locally, where I'm a board member. Things that are, again, are important in my life and where my voice can, make a difference, whether it's maybe raising money or funds, or just participating. That's really kind of been my direction after the military.
And it's so commendable that you continue to use your platform for veterans, for service men and women in armed forces. What would you say you would like to see the government do more of when these veterans return back from their tours of duty?
Right. Well, I think by and large, the government has the kind of the right focus. Our Veterans Administration is a work in progress, and there's certainly some improvements that that need to continue to happen there. What I'd like to see is our government and our private sector work more closely and more effectively in making sure that our veterans transition into out of the military into the private sector. I think there's a huge gap in understanding our military. And what I mean by that is that, I know wholeheartedly that our public understands what our military is about, what we do, what we're about, why, the purpose of us. But almost like, trying to tell somebody who watches a football game, but who doesn't understand what it takes for you to play at the highest level. Our public doesn't really understand how we're wired in the military. They don't understand. They look at our resumes and they say we don't have this, we don't have that. But if you truly understood what we do have, forget the rest of that stuff that we don't have, because we're going to be a value added to your team. And I think what I say is, we look back at the greatest generation. We readily identify that as the generation that served in World War II and after that, which is really one of the things that propelled our country into the role that it is now. And we have an opportunity to kind of capitalize on that talent with the more than 17 million people, men and women, that have served over the past 20 plus years. And capitalize on that talent. And I don't know that we're truly capitalizing on it as a nation, because again, I don't think we have the deep understanding and appreciation of what our military experience can bring to their organizations.
We face the same thing as former athletes. Often we don't have all the tools or requirements in the business world, for the simple fact we've been playing football for the majority of our life. So it's definitely an uphill battle, but you're on the right path in terms of your advocacy and everything that you are doing for the veterans. So I'm pretty sure they appreciate that. And with Veterans Day coming up, how do you spend it, and how will you be spending it this year?
So I think I've got a few chats that I'm doing with some organizations that are doing holding events with veterans. So I guess the big part is I'm speaking, and really this kind of window that's I guess starts with you all today through the 11th. I'm communicating with a number of organizations. So, it's, as I kind of run through in my mind, I've got something I'm doing with the FBI. I've got something I'm doing with a high school football team in Wisconsin. A couple of events with the private sector and even a city out in Oregon. So again, I'm blessed to have a demand for to have something that I'm able to share that people want to hear about. So and so I want to emphasize the value of our veterans and our families, because our families serve and sacrifice as well.
Before we let you go, Colonel Gadson, I got one question, and I have a strong tendency to ask a lot of our guests, especially because everybody who we bring on the Behind the Mask podcast show, they're very influential. So we definitely want to be able to help you out as much as we possibly can with spreading your word. But my question to you is well, first of all, stating you have a long list of accomplishments, very, very decorated, highly decorated throughout your career, even life after the military. How would you want to be remembered at the end of the day when it's all over, said and done?
Thank you. Great question, Takeo. Maya Angelou said, people won't remember what you said. People won't remember what you did, but they'll remember how you made them feel. And if I can be remembered by, treating everybody with dignity and respect and not being perfect, but just being a good person, I would be happy with that.
Well, you definitely get that nod in our books.
That's a fact.
For sure. Colonel Gadson, we appreciate the time. We know your time is valuable. Thank you. And we look forward to talking to you again. And if you're ever in Atlanta, maybe we'll take you down to the aquarium and I'll consider jumping in for scuba.